Hey guys, welcome back to our third and final video lecture for week 3. The topic for today, we're going to be discussing America's preparations to fight in Europe. All right, so let's get going. So, Europe first, that really was the policy that Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill came up with when they met in December of 1941. They felt that the threat from Nazi Germany was more pressing and that Europe was closer to collapse than, say, Asia was under the thumb of the Empire of Japan. So, per this strategy, the Allies would concentrate most of their forces on the European offensive while initially fighting a defensive war against Japan. So we are aiming to push the Nazis back and hold the Japanese at bay. That's going to be the strategy at the onset. Okay, so moving on to our next slide. The Axis expands. When the United States entered World War II, the Axis powers controlled most of Europe. And from our slide, we can see just how much of Europe Nazi Germany actually controlled. Those dark green areas, that's Nazi Germany and Italy. The light green areas are places that they controlled. And then the red areas are the Allies. All right. Now, on the Eastern Front, the Nazis had invaded the Soviet Union using the concept of blitzkrieg or what's known as the lightning war to overcome Soviet troops. Now, initially, this onslaught, this push, this massive push against the Soviet Union was highly, highly successful. But Russia itself, the country itself, is going to come to the aid of the Soviets. The winter, when it takes hold of the country, is going to do immense damage to the Nazis. Okay, moving on to the next slide. The Desert Fox, perhaps one of the most well-known field marshals of the Second World War, was a guy named Erwin Rommel. Okay, now why is Rommel so important? Well, Rommel is important because of oil. Oil is key to the Axis strategy, not only for Japan. We talked about why Japan needs oil, right? They don't have the rich natural resources that many other countries do because they are an island nation. Well, Germany needs oil just as much. And in 1941, Hitler would send Erwin Rommel and his Africa Corps, which was a tank-based division, to North Africa. By June of 1942, Rommel's forces had taken much of the region and had pushed deep into Egypt. Again, this is about controlling the Suez Canal, about controlling the oil trade. Every country needs oil to keep their military going. Next slide. Nazism spreads across Europe. Many people were suffering in Nazi-occupied Europe. If you were not Aryan, this is not a place you wanted to be. Some lived under puppet governments like the Vichy French, while others endured harsh military rule. The SS, which were a fighting force within the Third Reich, were a brutal military unit that worked on behalf of the Nazi Party. And they forced millions of Europeans to labor in German arms industry. The SS treated Russians, Poles, other Slavs with notable contempt, in part because Hitler believed Slavs were subhuman. The Nazis worked them to death and killed large groups of Slavs outright. So again, when we look at the Holocaust, of course, we have great reverence for what the Jews experienced, but we have to always remember that it was all minority groups within Europe that were put under this immense amount of hatred. Many, many people would lose their lives because of it. Next slide. The Jewish question. This is obviously, the image on this slide is hard to comprehend, really. I mean, it's one of those things that they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. This one is worth an infinite amount of words. Okay, no group suffered more than the Jews. Okay, Hitler had long been obsessed with answering what he called the Jewish question: how to rid Germany of the Jews. He stripped Jews of their civil rights, had them beaten and killed, and confined to concentration camps. More Jews came under Nazi control as Nazi Germany expanded. Germans, specifically Nazis, hated the Jews within Germany, sure, but Jews throughout Europe were under siege. The Nazis forcibly moved Jews throughout Europe into these things called ghettos. The largest ghetto the Nazis established was in Warsaw. Thousands of people died from starvation and disease in these ghettos. Those that would survive the ghettos would be moved to situations that were even worse. And it leads to our next slide in the final solution. I just got to say, I hate not being able to speak about this with you guys in person. It seems like, it's just not the type of topic you really want to go over, not being in person. So anyway, the final solution. Gradually, the Nazis decided on what they called, like I said, the final solution. As part of the plan, they would systematically exterminate the Jews. The slaughter began in the Soviet Union shortly after Nazis invaded in 1941. They would have mobile killing squads where they would round up Jews and simply shoot them, kill them on sight. They would just kill them. Jews from many ghettos were shipped to the camps by rail, often packed into cars. And again, the next slide that we look at, some of the images that we see, very disturbing. I mean, you can see the sleeping conditions, right, that those Jewish men are experiencing. They're just so cramped. You see the really what look like mug shots of children. You see the gate Arbeit macht frei, work will set you free. Just horrible, horrible conditions that these people experienced. Next slide. Death camps. Unlike regular concentration camps, these death camps were equipped with gas chambers. So it becomes a mechanized system of killing people. It's not a soldier killing a civilian. This is murder en masse, trying to kill as many people as quickly as possible and then get rid of the evidence. Camp operators would seal groups of Jews and other prisoners inside these rooms, and then they would gas them, usually with carbon monoxide. People like pregnant women, young children, the elderly, people who were sick were killed almost immediately upon arriving at these camps. But able-bodied prisoners were kept alive as long as they could work, often at a nearby factory. Each death camp could kill tens of thousands of people each month, including Jews, homosexuals, disabled people, gypsies, Soviets, you name it. Anyone that was not Aryan was deemed a threat to the Reich and would be murdered. It's an unbelievably sad situation. When we look at the death toll of the Holocaust, it puts it somewhere around 12 million, with about half of those being Jews. Just put it in this perspective. Even today, all of the time that has passed, the Jewish population in the world is still not at replacement level from where it was in World War II. That's how horrific the Holocaust was. It's unbelievably sad. Okay. Next slide. So the U.S. economy roars. When Roosevelt and Churchill met in Washington, D.C. in 1941, they were unaware of the Nazis' final solution. We did not fully comprehend what was going on. Rather, their goal was to figure out how to win the war in Europe. And to do this, they first had to debate a number of potential strategies. The Allies had limited resources at the time. For at least a few months, the Allies would have to focus on defending their territory. We cannot go on the offensive yet. We must keep Britain afloat, right? We're trying to buy ourselves some time until we can rearm ourselves and we can fire the machine up. Okay, now next slide, where to drop the hammer. There was a number of ideas. How would we start to beat back the Nazis? Some believed that we should go in to France, right? That we should push into France and push them back into Germany. Others felt that it was better to go through Italy, the soft underbelly of the Third Reich, try to push them up that way. Others still, if you look at our next slide, thought that we should go through North Africa, right? Or even perhaps through the Soviet Union. In reality, there's going to be a combination of all of these. Okay, so over the next week, when we get into week 4, we're going to talk about specific battles of the Second World War. I hope you guys are well. As always, I miss you very much. I hope you have a good week. Please stay safe, and I will hopefully see you soon. Goodbye.